Am I in the right one?
You are, Bob. Yes.
I should be in, am I? How are we doing? Are we getting everybody in here?
Hopefully.
I think we're still waiting for Dan. Keith is here.
We're all getting so good at this. It's a shame not to keep doing it this way.
I don't know. I like going to the Borough Hall after all.
And seriously, I do like getting out of the office.
Yeah, right.
We need the personal interaction.
Yes. I agree.
Where's the rest of the gang?
I don't know.
We're missing Dan.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Okay, is everybody else here? I see Mr. Mooney's not here, or at least his picture's not here. Keith, are
Oh,
you
hold
there?
up, maybe I gotta flip my camera.
Okay, and there we got a few things going. Okay. Is Michelle here?
Yep, she's here.
Oh, okay, good.
Can you see me now?
We
Yeah,
can see you now.
Yeah, I can see you, Keith.
Okay. And I'm gonna try, I got one witness I think I need to try to track down.
Okay. Are you prepared to get started now, Mr. Mooney, or with who you have here, or?
I mean, my first witness is in. My second witness was listening on the other line and he sent an email. And I tried to send him another email. He thought our hearing was gonna be continued and I think he logged out. Oh, now he's saying he doesn't have the sign in.
Link.
Let me resend him, because I sent him the link in my original email to him yesterday.
Okay.
Oh, Gary,
Anytime we get to the
hey,
continued hearings, we should be able to
you gotta
meet
use the
in
link I sent you yesterday.
Dan, that's an interesting question. If we go back to in person, wouldn't I have to re-advertise it anyway because now the location's changing?
No, we just actually, that's a good question. We should announce where it will be. So I think that we may have to re-advertise if we're going back in person for the last one.
Well, and because I'm not sure if that location's gonna be Borough Hall or council chambers, I would say to be on the safe side, we should just probably re-advertise, period.
I think you're probably correct.
Okay.
I mean, if you can figure that out before if this one does not complete here by 5:30, we can announce it and we're fine.
That's a decision Pat and I need to make at some point.
All right,
We
so
need more information from the governor.
All right, well, then either way, it's going to have to be both of them will have to be re-advertised if we can.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to make sure.
We'll have to have provisions for a hybrid meeting if, for example, Nicole isn't on
Oh,
site.
that's right. That's
Right, that was what I was just gonna say. Is it gonna be okay that I'm not going to be there? I physically won't be able to be present on the 15th. I can do via Zoom, but I cannot be present. I'm not driving 8 hours back. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, I don't blame you on that.
Well, maybe if,
And I thought you liked this.
I love you, but I'm already given up an afternoon of drinking for you. So
maybe since we started this with Zoom, we can do Zoom regardless.
That's
Of
gonna
when the
depend on
governors-
the governor extending the emergency declaration and whether legally we can even do that though, Najla.
We'll have to look at that. Well, obviously, we have time to come to that resolution. There's a lot of new information coming out from the governor's office. Let's see where this all goes. Nicole, I understand your dilemma, and we will make sure that we either find another date or we could have it available by hybrid to let you come in that way, or we will be doing it by Zoom, one of those three methods.
okay, perfect.
Are we ready to start, Mr. Mooney?
Yeah, this is Gary. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Gary.
That's
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Romick.
Hi, I'm sorry. I sat through the whole meeting and then it timed me out and I just assumed that we would continue on. So I apologize. I know everybody's time's valuable.
And this is this Gary Romick?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you very much just for clarifying. All right, I think we're ready to proceed, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting of the Wyomissing Zoning Hearing Board to order. We're here to hear from Mr. Keith Mooney on behalf of his client, McMillan, equitable owner of property located at 1041 Bern Road, Condominium Unit 2, and identified as tax parcel ID number, which is on the record, who's requesting a variance from section 609 off-street parking requirements from the Borough of Wyomissing zoning ordinance. I can't, okay. Zoning issues, property was previously located in C1 and I2. The Borough Council adopted ordinance number 1416/2021, and updated official zoning map, rezoning the property to C2. 1041 Bern Road is a portion of condominium unit within the overall Wyomissing Industrial Park property. Applicant is requesting a variance from 609 off-street parking to allow the space to be used as a professional office without providing additional parking. Board had previously granted a variance in 2019 for the space to be used as a yoga studio. Yoga studio required 20 off-street parking. The proposed office would require 16. Parking requirement for all the existing uses in the park, including the former studio, is 1926. The square footage of all areas within each building were included to reach this calculation. There are pending applications and hearings scheduled for other condominium units within the industrial park property that will potentially further reduce the parking requirements for the property. Thank you for moving that up, Melissa. I would have been completely lost. Okay, Mr. Becker, you're going to proceed with instructions, which I think we're all aware of.
I believe we probably all are. However, I think there are a few new people here, so I want to make sure that we go through them again. Today, the burden of proof is on the applicant. So, Mr. McMillan, you have the obligation by and through your attorney, Keith Mooney, to present evidence and testimony that will support the reasons why you're requesting zoning relief. At the conclusion of your testimony and any witnesses, the board members and other members of the public will have the opportunity to ask questions of those witnesses. After you're completed, I understand, I see that Ms. Plank is here with her client. She's one of the adjoining property owners who is previously in other matters related to parking situations here at the Wyomissing Industrial Park entered her appearance at a party. I assume that she will be doing the same. If that's the case, she will then also have the opportunity to present witnesses, and we'll follow the same procedure where we will ask them questions at the conclusion of their testimony as well. After all the testimony has been presented, all exhibits have been entered, the board members will take the time to go into an executive session, and typically they will come back and render an oral decision the same evening. Although that did not happen earlier in our prior hearing, which is kind of a related type or similar type of hearing, and as a result, we had to continue it. Today, we have a hard stop at 5:30. So that means we will continue to go as far as we can. If we can't conclude, we will then look at other dates for the hearing to continue. Mr. McMillan, do you understand the way the hearing is going to proceed today?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Mr.
Excellent.
Mooney, you have any questions or any about the way we'll proceed? Okay, I saw your mouth no, but you're muted, Keith.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I turn it back over to you.
Okay, Mr. Mooney, it's up to you to proceed.
Okay, I would call my first witness, Matt McMillan.
We can swear Mr. McMillan and any other witnesses you have, and along with Michelle Bear.
Mr. Romig would also be sworn in as well.
Okay,
Raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give today shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
I do.
okay, thank you.
Before I get started, am I to assume that the application is a board exhibit or my exhibit?
The application is a board exhibit. However, Mr. Mooney, if you're going to be identifying specific pieces of that of the application for purpose of clarification, please identify them as applicant exhibits.
Definitely.
Okay?
Okay. Mr. McMillan, can you please state your full name and business address for the record?
Sure. Matthew McMillan. My current business address is my house, 44 Cheltenham Drive, Wyomissing, PA, 19610, which I'm looking to currently operate in the future at 1041 Bern Road.
And Mr. McMillan, how are you employed?
I am self-employed.
And when you say you're self-employed, are you the principal of a business?
Yes, Property Connect.
And what is your relationship to Unit 2 of the Wyomissing Industrial Park condominium?
I have entered into a lease agreement to operate my business there.
And is that lease agreement with Zenith Properties?
Yes.
I'd ask that the board look at the lease which is attached to the application.
Let's just mark that as applicant 1, Keith, just for purposes of ease of discussion.
That's the deed. There's the lease.
Is there some section of this in particular you would like us to?
No, I just want Mr. McMillan to identify that's the lease he entered into. Mr. McMillan, on the screen, you see a commercial lease. The authorized signers are yourself and Gary Romig. Is this the lease that you have entered into with Zenith Properties for the space at Wyomissing Industrial Park condominium?
Yes.
And that would be 4,000 square feet?
Correct.
How does Property Connect LLC intend to utilize the lease space?
Office space.
How many, and when you say office space, can you go into a little bit, what does Property Connect LLC do?
Absolutely. So we buy, renovate, and resell primarily residential real estate. And we will be using it as office space primarily for myself, a secretary, and then a handful of sales and marketing people.
When you say a handful of sales and marketing people, how many people do you right now have currently employed or working?
Yep. So it's currently myself. My wife is also part owner of the business. However, she does not operate in the day-to-day. We have a 2-year-old and a 2-week-old here at home, which is the reason I'm trying to move the office from my house because it's craziness here right now. So it's myself, her, again, she will not be at the office. And then I have a secretary, and I currently have 3 salespeople, which anticipating, growing that to, 2 to 3 more over the course of the next couple of years.
So currently you would occupy the 4,000 square feet with 5 persons, and you may see to grow that to 8 people in the foreseeable future.
Correct.
Can you explain what client contact, if any, would occur in the lease space?
Yeah, very little. I have 0 client contact now at my house. However, we would potentially need customers to stop by to select color options, or, if we had a closing or a document that they needed to sign. So it would be far and few between that we would have client contact, but, there would be some in and out.
What are the hours of operation and days of operation for Property Connect LLC?
Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Are you aware that according to the borough zoning ordinance, that 16 parking spaces are required for your proposed use?
Yes.
Do you believe that there is sufficient parking for your proposed use at the condominium complex?
Yeah, I think it's more than sufficient.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Becker, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Any members of the board?
I do not.
I think his testimony is pretty clear. Good. Okay. We can move forward, Mr. Mooney.
How about Ms. Blank? She may have some
Oh,
questions.
I'm sorry. Huh. Okay. You're not on the screen, Nicole. I didn't see you.
I'm sorry, I'm on my screen.
There
Okay,
you
so, Mr. McMillan, 4,000 square feet seems like a lot of office square footage for only 5 to 8 possible employees. What else are you going to be doing in the space?
Yeah, so I do need some warehouse space. Obviously, I currently have 8 houses that I'm remodeling. So, some materials in and out of that space. The garage in the back kind of works perfectly for that. So, we have probably about half of the space is going to be utilized as, some storage.
How did you calculate the 16 parking spaces necessary for your use?
Yeah, so my salespeople are 90% of their day is spent in the field, working with customers, or actually working on the homes themselves. So, typically they will stop by maybe once a day. They usually are not all, at the same time stopping by. So calculated by, a parking space for myself, for my secretary, and then obviously one for each of them. And then if we did have any clients that needed to stop by, we should have, plenty of spaces for them as well.
So you calculated based only on people that you think will be inside the space?
Ms. Plank, if I can interject, I filled out the application. The computation was done based on the square footage per the zoning ordinance as to how you get the 16.
That was what I was looking for him to testify. So he wasn't aware of any.
He
of
was
what you
not
put in the
aware.
application?
No,
Okay. So Keith, you did the calculation for him?
correct.
And you, well, gosh darn it,
Are you
Keith, now I
gonna
need to
start
ask you
cross-examining
questions.
Keith?
Keith, I need you to testify
Nicole,
now.
Nicole, please just direct your questions to the client or the applicant, and if he can't answer them, then we'll
Okay.
understand where you're going.
Mr. McMillan, was the configuration of the need for parking, did it take into consideration the warehouse space versus the office space?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? You broke up on me there.
When you did, when the calculation that was put in your application, did it take into
Yes.
consideration warehouse space versus office space?
So the application, as Keith said, I guess he filled that out for me. I was, however, asked prior to signing a lease by, I think, Tripp and I'm sorry, I'm missing the other agent's name who I signed the lease with, but they had asked me, hey, how many parking spaces do you think you need? And we based the calculation off of that. So I think I said, I had said less than 16. I forget right now what that number was, but I was answering your question based on, 16 being sufficient and how I came to 16 spaces being sufficient for my use.
So you don't know if the application and the calculation from the application actually takes in the dual use that you intend for your space?
The dual use, I guess I'm misunderstanding your question. There would be no use of parking spaces for the storage the storage space, correct? It would just be for the office personnel?
So you're not aware that the Wyomissing zoning ordinance requires parking spaces even for storage and warehouse?
I am now, but I believe that the 4,000 space is the 4,000 square foot space of 16 spaces is sufficient for that.
And do you know where your parking is located?
From my understanding, the parking is located in the parking lot in front of the Works and is it Pennsylvania Fitness now or PA Fitness? That section there.
Correct.
Yes.
No further questions.
If I may, if we can go off the record for a conversation for a second.
Well-
Actually, I believe we computed the space based on office. And if you look at the zoning ordinance, we actually over computed if half of the space is going to be warehouse or industrial for storage, because that only requires 2 parking spaces.
So are you going to provide testimony then, Mr. Mooney? So do we need to swear you in?
No, I'm just stating for the, off the record, our application took into account more parking.
Well, yeah, but I understand that. That may be for argument's sake, but we need
Right.
testimony.
No, I mean, we prepared to go on 16.
Do you have a,
That's how we calculated.
okay, do you have a
based
witness
on the
that can
whole use
provide
being office.
testimony, Mr. Mooney, about how those calculations were made?
No,
That's what Ms. Plank is
Yes.
getting at, which I think.
I need someone to testify to
Okay,
how that
Nicole,
calculation.
Nicole, just
got
stop,
into-
Nicole. Let
Sorry.
me handle it, please. Thank you. Mr. Mooney, it's your burden of proof. You need to be
Correct.
able to establish for the record, not through your testimony, unless you're going to be sworn as a witness, as to how you came to the calculations for the parking.
correct.
Okay, do you have a witness that's going to be able to do that today?
Yes,
Okay, perfect. So Nicole, he will get to that with one of his upcoming witnesses. All right,
Perfect.
Nicole, you have no further cross-examination for this witness, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mooney, on to your next witness, please.
yes, call Gary Romig.
Thank you. Mr. Romig, please remember, I believe you've been previously sworn.
Yes,
Mr. Romig, can you please state your full name and business address for the record, please?
yes, Gary Lee Romig. For the purposes of this meeting, it is 1041 Bern Road. I have a satellite office over in Muhlenberg Township, but for the purposes of this meeting, it is a variety of addresses within the owned by Zenith Properties in the Wyomissing Industrial Park Condo Association property.
Okay. And what is your relationship to Zenith Properties?
Founder and president.
And if you could scroll, Melissa, I believe, if you could scroll to the deed, which is above the lease. Mr. Romig, there's a deed on the screen dated November 16th, 1999 from Wyomissing Industrial Park Inc. to Zenith Properties. Is that the deed for Unit 2 of the industrial park?
Yes,
And has Zenith Properties entered into an agreement of lease with Property Connect LLC for 4,000 square feet of said Unit 2?
yes, sir.
And before I proceed any further, Mr. Becker, we can mark the deed as applicant's Exhibit 2.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mooney.
Mr. Romig, is it your understanding that the borough's zoning ordinance requires 16 parking spaces for the use that Property Connect LLC desires?
That is my understanding.
And did you come to that understanding through the real estate agents that you hired with the understanding that the applicant's use was for an office space, an office located in all 4,000 square feet?
Yes, sir.
And prior to the proposed use, was this use a use that housed a yoga studio?
It was intended to be a yoga studio, but they actually never, ever moved into the facility in this square footage.
But the yoga studio was permitted and just never honored their lease and moved in?
That is correct.
And is it your understanding that the yoga studio, when they received their approval, were required to have 20 parking spaces?
I believe that is correct.
And so it's your understanding that Property Connect LLC would utilize less parking spaces than the previously permitted yoga studio?
Significantly less.
Do you believe that given the hour of operation for Property Connect LLC versus the peak usage hours of the Works at Wyomissing complex, that there's adequate parking on site to accommodate this use?
Yes, sir.
Have you and other condominium owners of the Wyomissing Industrial Park condominium submitted a parking matrix for the condominium that would be recorded as an amendment to the condominium declaration?
Yes.
Melissa, could you scroll to could you put the declaration amendment on? Thank you. Mr. Roby, go on the screen. You see the third amendment to declaration of the Wyomissing Industrial Park condominium? Is that the declaration we speak of?
Yes, sir.
And is there a parking matrix attached to that as an exhibit?
Yes.
And maybe you could scroll to the matrix, Melissa, please. Thank you. Does that matrix provide for 162 spaces for Unit 2's occupants at times other than the Works at Wyomissing's peak hours?
Yes.
Are those peak hours listed as 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. daily for the Works at Wyomissing?
Yes.
Does the matrix provide more than enough parking for the inhabitants of condo unit 2 during their business hours of operation, in your opinion?
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, have you taken notice as if any other business or governmental entity has been utilizing your parking area during the Works at Wyomissing's non-peak hours? And if so, who and what have you noticed?
Over the course of 21 years, yes, there are many, seems like the neighborhood parking lot. And I'll give you a perfect example. Very recently, I posted new signs, kind of basically saying this is the property of the Wyomissing Industrial Park Condo Association. And the parking lot the very next day was significantly less inhabited than it was previously.
Is there a particular entity that you have noticed that parks in spaces that are not theirs?
More than one, and a bunch of neighborhoods, not that it means anything to hear, but I noticed the other day there were 4 unlicensed, unregistered cars sitting along Bern Road that belonged to a neighbor who came over and said, "You mean I can't work on my cars in your parking lot any longer?" So that's the sort of thing that's been going on. And I use that as a reference point to understand and believe after 20 years that there is more than ample parking if the post office and patrons of Russo's and various neighborhood neighbors have parked there for 20 years. And there's always ample parking in that lot during the day.
When you say the post office, what have you noticed with regard to the post office parking at the property?
Multiple parking spots throughout the entire complex every day that the parking lot is open.
Thank you. Is the proposed use one of the least intensive uses that you could propose for this vacant commercial property?
Absolutely. I couldn't think of any that would be less intrusive to the parking than this application.
Do you believe that there are unique physical circumstances peculiar to this particular property as a former industrial site that create a hardship with regard to usage of this property?
Yes, as an old industrial building, it's always challenging to turn it into something different than manufacturing as it was previously.
If the space were to remain vacant, does that present a financial hardship to you as the owner of the condominium unit?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that because of the physical circumstances that exist as a former industrial site, that there's no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the provisions of the zoning ordinance, and that the authorization of a variance is therefore necessary to enable the reasonable reuse of this property?
Yes, assuming that a zoning variance is needed for every application, yes.
Do you believe that neither you nor the applicant has created this hardship?
I do believe that.
Do you believe that the variance, if authorized, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located? Did you hear me, Mr. Romig?
Yes, that is what I believe. It will not alter the neighborhood.
Do you believe it will not substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property?
I do.
Do you believe it will not be detrimental to the public welfare?
I do.
Do you believe that the variance, if granted by the zoning hearing board, is the minimum variance that will afford relief and will represent the least modification possible to the regulations at issue?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Members of the board? Mr. Becker?
I think I'll hold to see if Mrs. Plank has any questions. I'll follow up after her.
Nicole?
I do, thank you. Mr. Romig, how did you calculate the spaces needed for this use?
I actually relied on I'm not an expert on Wyomissing zoning variants or zoning parking regulations. I relied on the realtor that I contracted to try to fill the vacant spots.
Is that realtor present to testify today?
I don't believe so. He might be, but I didn't
What's
see
the name of the realtor, Mr.
him.
Romig?
Austin Wolfington.
Yes, Mr. Wolfington is here. I see him on my screen. At least I see his name. So
Yes, hi, Dan. I am here.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Romig, you had a lease with the Met for 93 parking spaces, correct?
Yes.
And you voluntarily terminated that lease, correct?
Objection.
Well,
What's the basis for your objection, Mr. Marine?
Relevance. We presented no testimony with regard to a lease for other property.
He testified that in 2019, he obtained a variance for another tenant. It has all to do with that variance.
So
He got that variance because of the lease. So I'll get to I'll establish my relevance if you
just
let me.
as
keep
an
going.
offer of proof, Nicole, are you saying that they had that additional parking in 2019? And therefore there's less parking available now? Or are you telling us, is there some other reason? Explain to me the basis, the offer of proof of why you're asking the question.
To establish that in 2019, when the variance was granted, there was a lease for 93 spaces available, and Mr. Romig testified and even signed an affidavit to the same to allow that tenant to get its use, which would not have been granted without those 93 spaces.
Okay, please, I think to the board, I think that this is a fair line of questioning. I think we should allow them to proceed.
Right.
So I'll repeat my question. Mr. Romig, you voluntarily terminated that lease for those 93 spaces, correct?
Yes,
And in the past, you had used those 93 spaces to obtain various variances for various uses for your properties over the years, correct?
I believe so.
Did you contact the borough and let them know you were terminating that lease prior to doing so?
I don't recall that I did. I can't honestly remember that, but I can't
And
recall.
after you terminated that lease, then Borough of Wyomissing issued notices of violation to you and to Mr. White as well, correct?
Yes,
And the reason for those notices of violation were because you terminated and lost parking that was necessary for your uses in your buildings, correct?
I would say to you, intent was interpreted differently. If I have open parking spots in the general parking lot, whether or not those parking spots long before the Met owned them were open parking spots that were used under an agreement with a previous owner of the facility. So when I terminated those spots, and I think it is relevant and important to know why I terminated those spots. Am I allowed to explain why?
That wasn't my question.
Okay,
Mr. Romig, your attorney can redirect and get to that issue.
I got you.
Okay. So
So
please,
what was the question again?
My question simply was, the notices of violations were issued because you lost the parking that you had previously used to obtain variances.
Okay,
That's a yes, correct?
I would assume that that's the interpretation, even though the tenant never moved in.
Not talking about the tenant, I'm talking about why the notices of violations were issued. The notices of violations were issued because you terminated a lease and the parking that you had used to obtain variances was now gone. That was the basis for the notice of violations, correct?
I'm gonna object. He answered the question. He didn't give the answer she wants, but he answered your question twice now.
I think I'm going to allow Mr. Mooney, this is a cross-examination, she's pressing the witness, and I'm not sure I clearly understood what his answer was anyway.
I am,
But
you
Mr.
know,
Romig, just wait for a second, Mr. Romig.
yes, sir.
Mrs. Plank, would you please restate your question so we can get a clear answer to your question?
The notices of violation were issued as a result of you terminating the leases because you no longer had the parking available that you had utilized to obtain variances in the past. Correct?
You mentioned leases. What do you mean by leases? I don't know what you mean by
The
leases.
parking space leases.
I never had parking leases. I had a parking lease with the Met.
Correct. That's the lease I'm talking about. You had a parking lease with the Met for 93 spaces, correct?
But you keep saying leases, so you're confusing me.
Because Chip White had one as well. So I'll just stick with yours. You had a parking lot lease for 93 spaces, correct?
Yes,
You terminated that lease, correct?
yes,
And a notice of violation was issued because you did that, correct?
yes.
If I could, Melissa, would you be able to put up Met number 18 for me, please?
So while you're looking at your notes, Ms. Plank, please understand the time is now 5 o'clock. We have a hard stop at 5:30. We're going to need a few
Correct.
minutes, it appears to me, to look at dates again to reschedule this particular hearing. So please continue, Ms. Plank, but I think we're approaching probably around 1/4 or so. We need to take a break and just get all the administrative pieces of this resolved so we can have this hearing concluded at 5:30 today. So please proceed.
Yes, is that 18? I can't see the bottom of any of your pages, Melissa, so I don't get a full screen of you, and I don't know how to make your screen. I needed 18.
Yeah, some of the exhibits that were sent were not marked with numbers.
Not marked. How were they not marked?
I was gonna say, I don't have an 18.
There's
Okay,
one,
uh,
there's one that
yep,
has marking, but it doesn't
yep,
actually, I can't read that
keep
one.
going. I don't know how that
Ms.
happened.
Plank, what document are you looking for?
It's looking for the affidavit, which is coming up next. It's not, no, there you go.
Is that what you're calling 18?
Yeah, that was supposed to be marked Met 18. I have no idea why it's not.
All right, so look, I don't know what it's marked. I can't see that, but since this is the first time we're seeing it, this will be marked as Met Exhibit number 1. So please, for the
That's
record,
perfect.
when we get back together, make sure it's properly marked. So Met number 1 is the affidavit of consent. Please proceed.
And Mr. Romig, do you recognize this document?
I've been participating in this without video because I couldn't get it to work. So I can't see what you're showing.
Okay, then I'll just ask you one question. Did you sign an affidavit of consent for the yoga studio tenant with regard to parking?
I assume I did. If you have an affidavit there that I can't see, but it was years ago and I don't recall that, honestly.
There are other reasonable uses for this building, like storage or warehouse, correct?
It would be very difficult to have a use for storage. There are very few docks. They're occupied often. And we have a alleyway that has some parking, but it's relatively narrow. I wouldn't want to necessarily back a truck down there on a regular basis.
But you could use them for storage and warehouse, correct?
You could
It's
always use
possible.
it. It's possible.
It's possible.
Sure.
Two seconds. No further questions.
Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Romig?
No. No.
No,
Right? Mr. Mooney, do you have any redirect? Of
Just one redirect. Mr. Romig, can you tell me why the lease with the Met was terminated? That
Yes, sir.
Ms. Plank spoke of?
Yes, I recollect correctly, in the beginning when it was purchased, it was used for 20 years through Arrow International, respectfully in a neighborhood setting with with all the owners of Arrow, and Mr. Kozloff arranged a meeting, and as long as we took care of that and put a privacy fence up, he was okay with that. And as soon as the Met purchased the property, or soon after that, rents went from $500 to $1,500. And what caused the termination was when it went to $2,000 for my portion of my lease. And my understanding was the Works and Chip White had another agreement for the same amount with no guarantee it wouldn't continue to go up, and literally could go up month after month. And I deemed at that point in time, it really was getting too expensive for the minimal use that my tenants that were, I'll say, adjacent to it, for the number of spots it was taking up, it didn't justify the cost.
So Mr. Romig, if I'm correct, you didn't have a designated number of spaces in that lot?
No, I think Ms. Plank has mentioned it's 93, but they were not designated to individual spots. There might have been a general understanding. Obviously, people, if you're a tenant gone to Baja Tanning, you wouldn't necessarily park in the back of the lot. You'd want to park as close as you can. It was my understanding that that was the case, but it was a courtesy to my tenants at the time that I pay a fee per month to allow them to park close to their, to wherever they were soliciting, or I don't know if that's the right word, but.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Board members, do you have any questions in light of that discussion?
No.
Not at this time, Dave.
Mr. Mooney, do you have further witnesses?
No.
Okay. Ms. Plank, do you have witnesses that you would like to call today?
I do.
All right,
I have Michelle Bear and Mr. Timonchenko.
all right. Michelle, I think you've been sworn already, correct?
She is, yes.
Yes, Mr. Timonchenko, I don't believe that you were sworn, were you?
No,
All right,
I have not been.
let's swear in Mr. Timonchenko, please.
I have a last name spelling before we go further, please.
Timonchenko.
Thank you. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give today shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed, Ms. Plank.
Thank you. Mr. Timonchenko, what do you do for a living?
I'm a real estate developer and builder.
How long have you been in the real estate business?
Almost 40 years now.
And you stated that part of your real estate business is you included the word development, correct?
That's correct.
And as part of developing real estate, do you ever have a need for obtaining variances for parking?
Yes, many times.
And so you're aware of the burden on the applicant to obtain the variance for parking?
I am.
And are you aware that they need to show that it's not a hardship? That they, I'm sorry, they did not create the hardship?
Yes, I am.
That the variance requested is the minimum relief requested for the use of the property?
Yes.
That it will not substantially impair the appropriate use of the neighboring properties?
Yes.
And that the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood?
Yes.
Do you have an interest in a neighboring property?
I have interest in 2 neighboring properties.
And what would those properties be?
To the west, I believe it would be with the Wyomissing corporate campus, which is about 170,000 square feet. And directly adjacent to this property, the Metropolitan apartment building.
And is there also another piece of property, a parking lot?
Yes, there's 2 parking lots, actually.
So the Met itself has 2 parking lots.
The Met itself has 1 main parking lot and 2 adjacent parcels of land that are used for parking.
Okay. And what's the value of
If
the,
I may, Ms. Plank, with regard to ownership, does Mr. Timonchenko or a company he's affiliated with own the Met?
I thought he had testified that he owned that. I apologize. Mr.
Well, I'm
Timonchenko,
sure he doesn't own it as Kevin Timonchenko.
Mr. Timonchenko, who owns the apartment building known as the Met?
I believe it's the Metropolitan LLC,
And what's
but
your,
I'm not 100% sure.
and what is your role with the entity?
I own a lot of entities. I'm not really sure. I'm either the president of the general partnership or I'm the majority owner of the LLC.
What's the value of the apartment building known as the Metropolitan, known as the Met?
Between 16 and $20 million.
And what's the price range for the monthly rental fees for the apartments at the Met?
There's 82 apartments and they range in price from $2,000 a month to $3,500 a month.
And does that fee include parking?
Sometimes it does. We have indoor parking and we have assigned spaces and then there's open parking.
And if for the indoor parking, is there an additional fee for the tenants?
Yes.
If the relief requested is granted, that's being requested today is granted, do you feel it will have an adverse impact on the Met?
Yes, I do. That's why I'm here.
And why do you feel that there will be an adverse impact on the Met?
because of the parking hardships we have with the tenants, with our neighboring tenants.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand, Kevin. Would you say it again, please?
The hardships we're having with the customers and the employees of our neighboring tenant, of our neighboring property.
And when you say the neighboring property, which property are you referring to?
I
if
refer
I
to it as both. Yeah, I refer to it. You want to put an exhibit up or?
Well, let me just tell you this. Today, we're here for an application for what's known as condo unit number 2, which houses what used to house, or was supposed to house the yoga studio. It also has the military. It has the Laser Quest. It has the Baja Beach. That's unit 2. That's the applicant before us today. Do you have issues with that applicant?
Yes, a lot of them.
When did these issues start?
As soon as they gave up their lease for the parking lot in front of their building.
And the lease that you just described, was that a lease for the parking spaces that Mr. Romick just testified about, the 93 spaces?
Yes.
And what are the issues that you're experiencing? Can you explain them to the board?
From particularly condo 2, it's just how many of their customers and their customers, or their tenants and their customers, are parking in all of our lots, both along the side of our building. And I don't know if you want to bring up a parking lot diagram.
I can.
And then the front.
I can. If you, Melissa, if you could just scroll up to that diagram that showed the parking, that perfect. Thank you. You're awesome.
Okay, we'll mark this as Met Exhibit number 2.
Yes, please. Thank you. So, Mr. Timchenko, can you identify this document for the board?
This is a parking diagram of the Metropolitan and the surrounding parking lot.
Okay. And can you, when you say that you're having issues with them, with the tenants and their invitees and their employees parking at the Met, where are they parking?
Well, currently we're 100% full, so the parking lots are usually full. But on this particular diagram, I don't know how to, on the
Oh,
left-hand
wait,
side.
so hold on, Kevin. Melissa, would you please give Kevin the mouse control?
Dan, I wouldn't know how to do that. I'm sorry. I wouldn't know how to move it.
I hate
So
Zoom. I hate Zoom. All right, then you're gonna have to try to.
Can anyone see mine?
No, we can't see. So why don't, Melissa, why don't you give Nicole cursor control and let Nicole direct his testimony based upon her use of the cursor.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
yes, so right where that was right there, there's 5 or 6. Yes, those 2 spots which are closest to condo 9 are consistently being parked in by the uses of condo 2. And then if you go to the front of the building, right now up to right there.
Just for 1 second. Can you orient me here, Kevin, or
Sure.
Nicole, through your testimony from Kevin, can you please orient me where we are?
Surely.
I can. If you look at the big, move it up a little bit, Nicole. That's the main parking lot for the Metropolitan. That's the front of the building.
So
And
where's
it's
the
off
building?
of,
The building
it's
is
off of
down-
which road, Kevin?
You were both talking at the same time.
Sorry. Nicole, go.
So Kevin, if you could identify some roads for the board, like here is Hill Avenue, correct?
Okay.
Correct.
And this building right here is condo unit number 2?
I don't see your cursor anymore, Nicole.
Oh, Melissa, give it back to me. Where did you go? There you are. Sorry. This is condo unit number 2.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay.
And
I understand.
sorry. And this was the 93 parking spaces that you used to rent to Zenith Properties.
That's correct, except it doesn't include that little jut out on the bottom left. No, to the left.
Down here.
Right. Yep, did not include that.
Okay, but it was all of this.
Yes,
Okay. And you just testified that this is the front of the Met building right here, correct?
yes,
Off of Hill Avenue.
Yep.
And these spaces and these spaces are all part of the Met parking, correct?
Yes, and those are the people, a lot of those spaces are the people who pay the most, $3,500, $3,000, $2,500 for their apartment.
And your issues,
They're assigned those spaces,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. And then
And-
if you go to the front, the left-hand corner of the front, yeah, that's the other area where they park because it's as closest to the condo too.
so they're not
Yep.
going over and parking in the works and in front of the works in gold. They're coming over and parking in front of the Met.
Well, I don't know if they're doing that or not. I know they're parking in mine. So,
And have there been altercations as a result
Many of
of
them.
these?
yeah, every single one of
These-
my employees has had an altercation with at least one or two of these people. I personally had 4 of them. So because I live in this building, people where they're dropping off at the training center and they're going, I'm just waiting for my son to come out. And I tell them that you're in a reserved parking space, where I've actually gotten to the point where I've just told my employees, do not have confrontations anymore. I don't want anybody to get hurt or shot, for crying out loud. And it's obviously died down over COVID, but it was really bad before COVID. And we now start seeing it come back up again, where more and more people are parking there from both condo 2 and the works.
Has the applicant done anything to alleviate these issues?
0. In fact, he's never called me. Neither one's ever called me and tried to work anything out. Has never asked me what they can do to help. Nothing. And as an example, there's a new training facility behind the Met, where, and I've had issues with them and I called him up, he handled it right away. That's what neighbors do. They handle, you can work together. They have never worked with me to try to solve my issue.
Have the tenants of condo unit 2 reached out to you in any way, in any capacity?
Yes, in fact, Baja Beach reached out to me and personally said they would pay the $2,000 a month rent, just them. That's how important it was for them to park in front. Because I called them up, they knew people were parking in my lot. It wasn't conducive for them to have people walk from in front of the works. So they said, and I obviously said I didn't know how to police that if just letting their tenants in. So I never rented it to them.
Are there any issues with any of the other tenants? I know about the parking, but are there any other issues with the tenants and the use of your Met property?
Yes, the government training center or recruiting center is consistently working out on our parking lot. I don't know if I've sent you pictures and videos to the point where we had to send them a letter asking them not to stop working out on our property. And they do it in both my property and in their side property during the day.
And you testified, and you would agree with the testimony of Mr. Roming, that there were leases with both the Zenith properties and the works for parking, correct?
That is correct. I had a
And do you
lease for approximately 7 years with Gary. Never raised his rent one time. Never raised it for 7 years. And then I did raise it.
Ms. McMillan,
And-
before you continue, it's now 5:21. We have the hard stop. How much longer do you believe you have for Mr. Pamachenko?
Couple of minutes. I probably can get it by 5:30.
Okay, the problem is we need to also establish, administratively, we establish some time.
Then I won't be able to.
Okay, so at this point, let's see if we can, I think the dates are pretty clear here because we've already gone through this with the prior hearing. But let's just confirm again with everybody. I believe the date that we looked at was June 15th. Does that date still work for everybody, I assume? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes,
And the board members, that all works. Mr. Mooney, for you?
yes, as long as I'm done by 7, I have a 7:30 Borough Council meeting.
Okay, well, we should be done, I'm sure, hopefully by then. Michelle and Melissa, you guys are both available as well?
We are, but similar to Keith, we have a rec board meeting at 7 o'clock, so we would need to be done a little bit before that as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think at this point, we looked at doing the other hearing, at 2 o'clock. So what, do we want to schedule this one for 4 o'clock?
3:30, 4 o'clock. I think 3:30 would be sufficient.
Okay, 3:30?
Dan, can I quickly add to, Keith, there was no mention in your application of a warehouse use, which is no longer a use permitted by right on this property. So you're gonna need to amend the application to request a use variance to include warehouse. I'll need the breakdown of which portion of the 4,000 square feet total will be used as warehouse, so I can redo the parking requirement. And since we need to re-advertise this anyways, since we don't know how it's going to be held yet, that part of it is not an issue. But I just wanted to be clear, you are gonna need to amend your application.
Understood, and I will clarify what that use is, what he meant by warehouse and storage, and what they will be storing.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm not sure we actually went off the record, but for purposes of the record, then we intend to continue the hearing until June 15th at 3:30 p.m. And I understand that Ms. Blank, if we're going back in person, that creates an issue for you for both hearings. So we may have to look at another date depending on how that works out if we can't go by Zoom or hybrid in some manner.
Okay.
All right. We have we're still about another, actually, let's wrap it up right now because I would like to spend a few minutes in executive session before 5:30 with my board. All right. Is there any other business to come before the board, the zoning hearing board? Mr. Mooney?
I have no other.
And you agreed to that extension through the 15th at this point?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Plank, you also agree to the extension?
I do.
Any other business to come before the board?
No.
Okay. At this point, if we stand in recess, although it looks like we will have this re-advertised because of the need to do so for identifying the location. At this point, if we can, to the board members, I'd like to just go into an executive session if we can have a few minutes just to chat.
Okay.
Thank you for your time this evening, and I will sign off.
Thank you very much.
Are we going?
Yeah, we have to go to the other link that